Was trying to talk. He did want to talk, but he didn't actually verbalize any words. I always, that's one of my, gonna be one of the biggest mysteries in my life, because he was trying to tell me something.
I can tell right away he's in bad shape. He's bleeding out of his mouth and nose. He's got multiple torso hits. There's a lot of blood. There's so much blood, I can't even tell exactly where he's hit, because there's just, he's bleeding so badly.
For nearly 30 years, the world was told Tupac Shakur never woke up, that he died unconscious, silent. But inside a Las Vegas trauma unit just after 3 a.m., Tupac opened his eyes and began asking questions. A nurse who was alone with him says he wasn't confused, wasn't hallucinating, and wasn't at peace. She says Tupac believed he knew who wanted him dead, and that the danger came from closer than anyone realized. If this account is true, then Tupac's murder wasn't random, and it wasn't just gang violence. It was something much more calculated.
She said that the doctor said that Tupac was going to survive, and she said that Tupac's family was already setting up plans to send him to Arizona where he can go to rehab.
However, this nurse, who says she worked in the trauma unit throughout his hospitalization, claims Tupac was alert more often than publicly acknowledged. She says his words during those moments were not random or confused, but intentional. In her view, what he shared reflected deep awareness of the situation and fear surrounding who might have wanted him harmed.
Of course, I don't think she's, fabricating anything. I think it might have been something where he definitely would have had to go to rehab because they removed his lung and stuff like that.
The nurse, who chose to remain anonymous due to legal and personal concerns, states that she worked overnight shifts at University Medical Center in Las Vegas from September 7th through September 13th. She recalls the intense scene when Tupac arrived: severe gunshot injuries, frantic medical staff, and an extremely tense environment that required increased security. What stood out to her most was how mentally clear Tupac appeared in the hours following surgery, and how those conversations stayed with her long after.
The time I got there, he had tubes in his throat, in his nose, in his mouth, so he ain't talked to me, not verbally.
She claims that during one late-night medication round, Tupac indicated he believed he knew how the situation unfolded and that it did not align with public assumptions at the time. According to her recollection, Tupac briefly regained consciousness around 3 a.m. on September 8th, several hours after emergency surgery. Despite the seriousness of his condition, she says his focus appeared unusually sharp. He asked where he was, asked about Suge Knight, and then made a comment that suggested resignation rather than confusion. To her, it sounded as if he believed the outcome had been inevitable.
He was conscious. He was trying to talk. He did want to talk, but he didn't actually verbalize any words.
As she monitored his condition, Tupac continued speaking in a strained but steady voice. He referenced past experiences with violence and implied this situation felt different to him. He mentioned the events earlier that night, including the altercation at the MGM Grand, and said he had been hesitant about traveling to Las Vegas at all. According to the nurse, Tupac suggested he felt pressured to attend for business reasons, and that in hindsight, he believed warning signs had been ignored.
Doctors sometimes even thought that he was going to survive. When I seen him, he was sedated. And when I seen him, I knew it was more real than, what was being relayed to us.
She says Tupac then made comments that caused her to reconsider common narratives about the shooting. According to her account, he implied Suge Knight may have been aware that something was wrong. Tupac allegedly pointed to how the car was positioned at the traffic light and how little reaction time there was. The nurse says she did not interpret this as a direct accusation, but rather Tupac expressing doubts and unanswered questions that troubled him from his hospital bed.
He was trying so hard. He was shaking the bed. He was looking at me, with his big old eyes, and I know he was trying to tell me something, but I don't know.
When the nurse asked whether he shared these concerns with police, she recalls Tupac responding with visible frustration. He reportedly indicated that law enforcement had already spoken to him, but that he chose not to elaborate. According to her, Tupac believed that powerful interests could influence outcomes regardless of what he said, and that many people around him closely monitored who entered his room and what conversations took place.
Why Afeni pulled the plug because of his condition, but I mean, it would be more appropriate since you was his brother. Afeni, her decision to pull the plug on him, from your point of view, what made her pull the plug?
On September 12th, doctors made the decision to heavily sedate Tupac due to his declining condition and repeated attempts to move despite serious injuries. The nurse says that before medication was administered, she was checking his bandages when he briefly opened his eyes. She asked if he needed anything. According to her recollection, the nurse states she recorded these exchanges in personal notes, not official medical records, because she did not know how to handle information that felt beyond her role as a healthcare provider. As Tupac's condition worsened over the following days, she claims he continued to wake intermittently, sometimes speaking with more urgency. She says that during one shift on September 11th, Tupac made statements that suggested he had been considering leaving Death Row Records and believed that decision may have placed him at risk. According to her, he mentioned concerns about financial disputes and internal conflicts, though she emphasizes these were his claims, not verified facts.
Because he had already flatlined a couple of times. And she didn't want him to keep going through that.
She recalls Tupac saying he had been discussing ways to exit his contract and protect himself legally. In his view, tensions had escalated, and he feared that rumors and public confrontations could be used to frame events as something they were not. When the nurse asked why he was confiding in her, she says he told her that someone needed to remember his perspective in case he didn't survive. He reportedly expressed concern that simplified explanations would replace a more complex reality.
So I think it was like twice before she, let him go. And that's reasonable. You know what I mean?
Tupac shook his head and quietly asked her to pass a message to his mother, that he had tried to move forward, that he understood the risks, and that she would know where to look for answers. These were the last clear words she recalls him speaking. Within hours, his condition deteriorated rapidly. The nurse says she was present when Afeni Shakur ultimately agreed to stop resuscitation efforts. Tupac Shakur passed away at 4:03 p.m. on September 13, 1996. She recalls the hospital growing quiet afterward, visitors leaving, family grieving, and investigators arriving after many of the most critical moments had already passed.
When I was, when I found out, I could live with it more,
Yeah, man, sad, man. I heard if he would have survived, he would have never been the same Tupac.
For years, the nurse remained silent about what Tupac shared with her during those 6 days. She says she feared possible retaliation from people connected to Death Row, worried about breaking patient confidentiality laws, and honestly questioned whether anyone would take her seriously. But as the case stayed unsolved for decades, and as Keith D was arrested in 2023 while claiming Orlando Anderson was responsible, she watched the story shift toward a simple gang conflict instead of deeper industry involvement. At that point, she felt the truth needed to be documented. So what does her account actually show? And why did she wait nearly 30 years to speak about what Tupac told her before his death?
He's still alive, still breathing. Because some people, it sometimes comes up, well, why didn't she give him CPR? Well, because he's still breathing. You don't give a breathing guy CPR.
The nurse says she attempted to contact authorities back in 1997. She reached out to detectives with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department who were assigned to the case and told them she had information about Tupac's final statements. According to her, they took her report, asked a few basic questions, and then the communication stopped. There were no follow-up calls, no requests for detailed testimony, and no apparent interest in exploring the possibility that Tupac believed he had been betrayed by people connected to Death Row Records. She believes the investigation moved away from anything that could potentially involve Suge Knight or expose illegal activity operating behind a music label. What strengthens her account, in her view, is the level of detail she remembers. These are things she says she could only know if she had actually been present in the room. She recalls specific times, medications, the names of doctors who rotated through Tupac's care, and small personal details, like the CD player beside his bed playing Vincent by Don McLean on repeat, because his fiancée believed the song might help him recover. She also kept personal journals from those 6 days, notes written after each shift that recorded not only medical observations, but also the emotional toll of watching someone so young fighting a battle he was unlikely to win.
Mother, because she's very strong, positive, and the way she was explaining to us, he's okay, he's gonna be okay. And I think everybody thought he was gonna pull through.
The reference to a locker in Tupac's final message to his mother has never been clearly explained, and the nurse admits she doesn't know what he meant by it. However, based on what Tupac reportedly told her about gathering information related to death row, copying documents, and recording conversations, it's possible he was referring to some kind of place where he believed important material was stored. Whether Afeni ever located what he mentioned, or whether it still exists somewhere undiscovered, remains one of the many unanswered questions surrounding Tupac's death. What many find most striking about the nurse's account is how aware Tupac seemed of his situation. She describes him as someone who had already connected the dots, even while severely injured in a hospital bed. This challenges the idea that he was simply a reckless figure caught off guard by street violence. Instead, she portrays him as thoughtful and strategic, someone who believed he was trapped in circumstances that could cost him his life and who tried to prepare an exit before time ran out. The business paperwork, the alleged concerns about Suge Knight, and plans to leave death row suggest Tupac may have been preparing to confront serious issues, and that possibility raises difficult questions about whether someone wanted to stop him before he could do so.
If I'm not mistaken, he died on the table one time in surgery 3 times. And they kept bringing him back to life multiple times. I try my best to be clear as possible, but I know it happened multiple times. And after a while, his mother was like, you know what, just let him go.
The nurse's decision to speak publicly also comes at a critical moment. With Keith D's trial scheduled for February 2026, prosecutors are building their case around the idea that Tupac was killed by members of the South Side Crips as retaliation for the MGM Grand altercation, a theory centered on gang-related motives. But if the nurse's account is accurate, and if Tupac truly believed the betrayal came from within his own circle, then that version of events becomes more complicated. Whether her statements will influence the trial is still unclear. Defense attorneys could potentially argue that Keith D and Orlando Anderson were used as convenient figures in a larger scheme, while prosecutors may dismiss the nurse's memories as unreliable due to trauma, time, and decades of media coverage. Still, the fact that a medical professional who was present during Tupac's final days is now challenging the dominant narrative adds another layer to a case already filled with inconsistencies and unresolved questions.
Instant snap. He went from being, trying to yell, trying to squirm, trying to get Suge's attention, to he just went totally peaceful, like he just totally stopped. And, you could tell he reached a point where he physically gave up.
For the nurse, coming forward is not about publicity or profiting from Tupac's legacy. She has reportedly turned down payment for interviews, refused book deals, and chosen to remain anonymous to protect herself and her family. Her goal, she says, is simply to have the information on record. She wants people to understand that Tupac Shakur believed he knew who had betrayed him and why, and that his final statements were not random or confused, but intentional efforts to leave behind clues that might one day point toward accountability. Whether justice ever follows, or whether those truly responsible are ever identified, is beyond her control.
But now, at least, what Tupac reportedly shared in those final moments is part of the public record, and history will have to decide how it fits into a story that has remained unresolved for far too long.